Well, hello everybody, my name's Louise Savage and an extremely warm welcome to my channel. So I thought I would talk about my book of the month for February. It's kind of slightly cheating because, as you may well be aware, most of my reading for February has been busy reading the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction Longlist. However, before I settled down to that task, I did have the chance to read a book for Savage Prompts, and the prompt for February was, if I remember rightly, to read a book with a body of water in the title. So I chose Alix Nathan's Sea Change, and I've had this book on my shelf for a while and been really looking forward to getting round to it, and of course hadn't got round to it. Sorry, I'm just making myself a bit more comfortable as usual. And I had really enjoyed The Warlow Experiment, which is the other book of Alix Nathan's that I'd read, which was about an experiment where a sum of money was given to a man or it could have been a woman, I guess, don't know, given the era, to spend time living basically on his own in a basement of somebody's house in relatively luxurious circumstances, but the idea being to see what would happen to his psychology and his physical being through being trapped down there. And I thought it was a lovely, not lovely, that's not the right word. I thought it was a fascinating concept for the book, and I just loved the way she wrote that novel. So when I was combing my shelves for a book with a water reference in the title, then this seemed like an obvious choice. And I thoroughly enjoyed this one as well. She writes historical fiction, and one of the things I really enjoy about Alix Nathan's writing, I've come to realise, well, I think she writes beautifully. Her scene setting is extraordinary, but also she clearly does a lot of research, and she somehow manages to give voice or attention to less conventional members of society from the past. So hopefully you'll come to see what I mean by that when I actually finally get around to talking about the book. So the book's protagonist is a woman called, I think it's Sarah Battle. I know her I'm pretty sure it's Sarah. And sorry, it's a few weeks since I read it. Yes, it is. It's Sarah Battle. Didn't want to mislead you. So Sarah Battle has decided to go on this balloon trip. It's Regency England, and she wants to prove that a woman can get just as much pleasure from going up in a balloon as a man. Now that immediately held my interest. And the story is based around a sort of true episode. So there's a French balloonist, because of course the art of ballooning was very new at that period in history. And this French balloonist takes her and her artist friend up into the air. And the description is wonderful of them going up, how she's feeling about it. She's sort of regretting what she's chosen to do, partly because she has a young daughter, Eve, who she's left behind. And of course, things don't go well. Well, they do go well to start with, and you get all this fantastic scenery and description of the experience. The balloonist is perhaps a little overconfident in his manner, and the balloon crashes. Now, I hope that's not a spoiler. It happens very, almost immediately in the novel. And there's an accident and she is presumed dead. The artist survives, and actually he then attempts to bring up her daughter Eve, Sarah's daughter Eve, because as far as they're aware, Sarah is dead. Her body's not been recovered that they know of. And this is where this sort of unconventional angle comes in, because Justin is a struggling artist. And one of the interesting things about this book I felt, and it really chimed when I read the Wild thing about Gauguin recently for the non-fiction long list, this question of how far an artist should go in terms of prostituting their art. So Justin, I think he's called Justin, the artist, is struggling, really struggling to make a living. It's really hard to make ends meet. He's also addicted to opium, and yet he has the responsibility of bringing up this, or he takes on the responsibility of bringing up this young girl because he's in love with her mother. Sarah Battle is a very beautiful woman who ran her own coffee shop in London. So you've got all of that going on. You've also got Eve, the daughter. Through the course of the novel, she's growing up and she becomes increasingly intrigued by her parents. Her mother and father were not married. They were living together. They went off to America together. And again, that's unconventional, or at least we're led to think it is for this period in history, or at least I was when I studied history at school and so on. And there is another couple towards the end of the book who, as my parents might have called it when I was younger, living in sin. So you've got these unconventional, or what I'm led to believe, have been led to believe were unconventional couples, living, in this society, and it's presented as not perhaps being unusual. It's just the way things are. So I really, that's sort of piqued my interest in Regency society, I suppose. Eve, the little girl, is also very aware that her parents were radicals. They'd gone off to America, and this is something else that the book highlights, is how, at the time, America was seen as the kind of the place to go to find out about social revolution and how to instigate social unrest and how to sort of change people's minds about the status quo in society. So that was quite refreshing to read about that as well. And there are quite a lot of intellectual developments that are looked at in this book, because actually there is a household on the east coast of England in which there is this mute woman who has been retrieved from the sea, and she is in the household of this absolutely, totally disturbed vicar, Reverend Sneed, and his wife. And he becomes a really unsavoury and worrying character, and he develops this obsession for Sarah. And we see all of that through his wife's eyes, which is also fascinating. And there is a young doctor who comes into the household as well, because clearly, the Reverend's views of how Sarah should be treated and his aims in terms of proving himself to be this miraculous curer of people, his sort of unscrupulous aims are challenged, or at least a challenge is acknowledged by this young doctor. So there is a conflict within the novel in terms of how you save someone's soul. Do you do it through going down a religious route? And I would argue that the church is quite heavily criticised in this book. Or do you start to think, as medics were doing at the time, that the answer to something like mutism might lie in psychology, because they think that this woman has tried to kill herself. And obviously, in Christian faith, for decades, well, centuries, people who had died by suicide were not allowed to be buried within consecrated ground, within churchyards. So that's a big sort of societal no-no at the time. But here in the novel, we're being shown that attitude was being questioned at the time. So throughout this book, you've got things happening in London, and you've got things happening in Norfolk, I want to say, and on the Norfolk coast. And I really liked that as well. I liked the way that this sort of rural, slightly more backward, as it would be, I mean, the rural community that I live in now, when I arrived here 20 years ago, I would say it was 20 years behind the community that the sort of town that I'd come from when I moved here. I think that's often the way with rural communities. So and I don't necessarily mean that's a bad thing, but here it's created this very sort of insular space, which has allowed Reverend Sneed to garner a lot of power, or at least he thinks he has. So I thought there were some very interesting sort of conflicts in the novel. I think as a piece of historical fiction, she wears her research lightly, and it brings up all sorts of interesting, as I've said, interesting themes and ideas. So I loved it for that. I just thought it was a really enjoyable, slightly quirky. I do think she's, you know, if you want to read something a little bit gothic and a little bit dark and historical, I think she's presenting something slightly different from the norm, and I thank her for that. So yeah, in terms of the prompts, I wanted to also have a quick mention of those in this video today. So I am woefully behind. I've read the first two, done the first two. I can't remember now even what the first prompt was. I don't know if it's going to come back to me right now. I should have checked before I started recording. The second one, as I say, was A Body of Water. And I know that the third prompt is to read a book with a utensil in the title. And thank you very much to those of you who are on Storygraph who have been posting lots of suggested books. I haven't got that far yet. I have to be honest, and that is something that Simon and I would want to make very clear about our savage prompts, is that it's not meant to put you under pressure. You know, you read them at your own pace. There is one for every month of the year in theory, but you could read 3 in 1 month if you wanted to. I try to spread them out, but I know that it's highly unlikely that this month of March, or maybe towards the very end, I will get to read a prompt book, because I am working my way through this marvellous list. And I'm just over halfway through now. In fact, a little bit over halfway through. I've got 6 books left to read on the long list, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. And I thought that I would feel a bit overwhelmed and daunted by them all, but actually I've managed to spread them out quite nicely. I got myself off to a really quick start because I knew I was going back to work for a few weeks. But now I've really settled in, and I don't feel under pressure to sort of grind through them now until the shortlist announcement, because they are such thrilling reads. You know, I can't, you know, bang on about it all the time, but I cannot praise this long list enough. Anyway, there we go. So, Sea Change by Alix Nathan, my book of the month. Happy reading, everybody. Please, would you comment below what your... Actually, I think it's a book with a kitchen utensil on the cover. But if you're involved in the prompt reading, could you post below in the comments what you're planning to read or have read for the March prompt? Because I think it will really help other people to not feel daunted by the prompts and to find something that they can read that fits the bill. So there we go. Anyway, take care, everybody. Have a wonderfully happy reading month, and I look forward to, I suspect my next video next week, I'm hoping, will be reporting back on the next 4 books that I've read for the Women's Prize, but we'll see how that reading goes. And by the time this goes out, the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist will have been announced. And again, I'm really interested to see what that looks like. I will be hoping to read the shortlist. I don't think I'll manage the long list. Anyway, take care, everybody. I'll shut up now. Leave you in peace. Bye.